Hi, my name is Karen Fabian and I'm the founder of Bare Bones Yoga, and welcome to the first video in my new free online training called the Bare Bones Yoga Learn Anatomy Challenge. I'm really excited to bring this to you, and if you're a yoga teacher in particular, I hope you're going to find this interesting, informative, and helpful. The idea around this challenge is to present you with a series of free videos here on my YouTube channel to teach you some of the fundamental aspects of anatomy. And if you're wanting to bring more anatomy into your classes and you feel like this is something that could really shift your teaching from being maybe just okay to having more of an impact, you're right. This has absolutely been my experience in shifting my focus to anatomically based cues. But in order to do that, you need to have a good understanding of the fundamentals, as well as maybe some of the more high-level, complex aspects of functional anatomy. And in addition, as that knowledge grows, you have to build the confidence in order to share it. And along with that confidence growing, you need to build a sense of how to present this information with clarity so that you don't overwhelm your students. And this is absolutely something that can happen because I'm sure you know that anatomy is a pretty complex subject. And the idea is, despite its complexity, we want to, in our classes, share some essential things that our students need to know, not only about the pose they're doing and the anatomy behind it, but also what are some things that they're doing in that posture, some movements they're making on the mat that can be helpful to their life off the mat. And this is really where the transformational aspect or the really impactful aspect of focusing on anatomy comes from. Because let's face it, even if our students are coming to class every day of the week, which most people are not doing, there's all the other hours of the day when the human movement system, when their body is moving around, even in sleep, in terms of how we're moving when we sleep, when we first get up in the morning, when we carry bags, when we pick up kids, when we are commuting, whatever it is, when we're sitting at our desk. There's all those opportunities for us to either be in not so great movement or to be in good movement, good healthy movement. And this is what I call moving smarter. And that's always been the theme of not only my teaching, but just my advising clients around just some of the common pitfalls that we have in posture that can really start to wear and tear the body in not so great ways. So this challenge is a way for you to understand some of the key aspects of anatomy, and then if your interest is piqued by watching these free videos, this free comprehensive training, I'm going to direct you to some resources that I've developed, and these resources will be able to give you even more information. So this is really meant to be a short kind of introduction where I'm going to go over some high-level concepts and some pieces about these high-level concepts, and then direct you to some more in-depth information and resources that I've built myself over the years that I'm currently sharing with teachers all over the world, and I'd love to share with you as well. So let me just give you the lay of the land. This is video 1 in the Bare Bones Yoga Learn Anatomy Challenge. And in order for you to go through the challenge, it's going to be helpful for you to download my free PDF guide. And this is going to be attached to this first video and to every subsequent video that I share. In total, there are going to be 9 videos, and my goal is to do 1 a week so that we're done in 9 weeks. But if things go well, I may actually be able to carve out time to do a couple or maybe even 3 a week so we can get through all of them faster. On the PDF itself that explains the challenge, you'll see what the goals of the challenge are. And I'm just going to go through a couple of them, some of which I've already shared. So the first one is presenting the case for why understanding anatomy is so central to teaching yoga. Why is it important? And that's what we're going to talk about in depth today. To help you identify some key bones, joints, and muscles of the body. Not every one, we're going to go over a handful of them. To help you identify red flags that you might see when you're teaching and what to do about them. and to help you build anatomically focused sequences, which is definitely something that teachers like to do. So those are only a couple. There's about 9 overall benefits that you'll read about on the PDF form. And on this form as well, I'm going to give you access to the link here for the YouTube channel, 2 different resources that I have, one of which we're going to be referencing today, my anatomy manual, and my online course, my most comprehensive online course called the Bare Bones Yoga Anatomy Blueprint. And that's an 8-module course that's going to go in depth for each one of these topics we're going to be covering here in this free training. What I want to just kind of lay out to kind of get the mindset in place is a couple of pointers here in terms of structuring kind of how you're going to approach this. So the first one is keep an open mind. If you've been teaching for a while and you're really kind of attached to the cues that you have, or maybe you feel like you really can't learn anatomy, or you've tried but the information didn't stick, or you got overwhelmed, I'm just going to ask you to kind of come into this with an open mind, what we call in yoga a beginner's mind, right? And just, have an open mind to learning and maybe trying something different. If you're a newer teacher and you're just recently done with your training and you feel like, and this is something I hear sometimes, actually more often than not, I didn't really grasp anatomy in my 200-hour training, and it can be for a variety of reasons. This is going to be perfect for you because this challenge is going to go over several of the key points that are really going to be critical for you to own as a yoga teacher. So be willing to absorb and then decide what makes sense for you to retain and to use in your teaching. Take your time, right? I mean, I've been teaching for 15 years. Prior to teaching yoga, I had a medical background that I used in clinical settings. My undergraduate work was in physical therapy and rehab counseling. So, I mean, I've gone through an academic path where that was my introduction to anatomy. My work as a yoga teacher and, all the training I've done as a teacher, my subsequent work, actually most recently getting my certification from the National Association of Sports Medicine as a certified personal trainer, going into corrective exercise techniques, like all of this has been for me a 15-year, as of now, endeavor, plus the training I had before as an undergraduate and a graduate in college. So I want you to just keep in mind, we're not going to try to kind of tackle everything, and I don't want you to feel like as a newer teacher or someone who's been teaching less than 5 years, you have to kind of get this all in one fell swoop. Give yourself the time and space to absorb the information and then to implement it in your teaching as soon as possible, because that's the best way to learn anything, is to start using what you know right away. The next thing is use the breakdown provided to take the broad subject of anatomy and help you break it up into smaller topics. This is another big thing I hear from teachers. It's such a big subject, I don't know what to focus on. And quite frankly, there are a lot of teachers out there that are sharing amazing information, but in my opinion, it's way too detailed for the general yoga teacher population. So we don't need to necessarily get down to the level of mitochondria or cell structure or maybe some other topics that are great to read about and great to know about when you have the time. But what we're really trying to do, and what my focus is how can I give you the big building blocks around anatomy and really help you understand them and share some of my own approach to how I share this with students in what I believe is a really understandable way, and see, does this resonate with you? What are some ways that you might want to share this with your students so that they can really, really get it? So again, great to have a lot of information, but when you're overwhelmed and you feel like you really aren't getting it, you need to start with the basics, and that's what this training is all about. And the last thing is, as you go through each video, start to make a list of cues that you can use based on what we're talking about. And that's going to be how you can immediately implement this in your teaching. What you say is one of the biggest ways to share anatomy with your class. It's not going to come primarily from the assists you give them or from the sequences that you do, that you offer them. It's going to almost exclusively end up being what you say, how you cue. that is where the primary kind of mode of teaching them anatomy is going to come from. Okay, so final thoughts, and I'm going to go over this again at the end of the video. Anytime you have questions, always feel free to email me, Karen@barebonesyoga.com, and the website, of course, is barebonesyoga.com. Don't forget to track the time that you're spending on this challenge and use it as non-contact hour CEUs for your Yoga Alliance registration. And I have online classes on my website, and I highly encourage you to download at least one or two. They're only $10, and it's going to be a great way for you to see how this anatomically based cueing looks in real life. You'll be able to practice. It'll start to reinforce some of the things that we go over in these videos. So there's more on this guide, but I don't want to take up all the time. I want to give you some time to go through the guide when you download it. So let's take a look at the first video topic. And the first video topic, I'm just going to reference the guide here, is why understand anatomy? Why is it so important for yoga teachers to understand anatomy? And so for this, I'm going to go into my anatomy manual, and this is something that you can purchase as well if you'd like to use this as a guide to coach you through this free training series. And you can buy this right off my website for $65. So let me go to, it is literally the first chapter, and it's around this idea of why does it even make sense for us as yoga teachers to understand anatomy? And you may be listening to this and you may think, duh, that's pretty obvious. But I can tell you that I have had conversations with teachers who have taught for a while who really choose to avoid speaking to anatomy in lieu of focusing on other things. Now, of course, we have a lot of different things that we can focus on when we teach. And it's not so much that we don't want to maybe focus on the spiritual aspect of yoga or the chakras or just different things that are less about the physical body, but it's really more about how can we blend anatomically based cues into our teaching in an understandable way so that there's a balance. Right? It's great if your vibe is that you want to focus on the chakras and you want to focus on energy and prana and that aspect of yoga, do it. But there's nothing to say that you can't also benefit from really understanding anatomy so that you can blend that in as well. And the same for someone like me. I choose to focus primarily on the anatomical side of yoga, but it doesn't mean I don't blend in some verbiage around speaking to spirit. So it's really not an exclusive thing. And because yoga is a movement practice, in my view, we've really got to understand anatomy because that's the basis of what we're doing at a fundamental level. Okay, so I'm going to briefly go over for you some of the things, some of the thoughts around why it makes sense to understand anatomy as a yoga teacher. So the first one is it helps us teach in such a way that we're reinforcing for our students safety and stability. And you may hear that and you may think, oh my God, boring, boring. When I look on Instagram, I see all these poses and people doing all these things that don't look safe and don't look stable, and that's what makes them look really cool. Well, even in a really cool posture, you have to have stability and you definitely want to have safety. Otherwise, you're not going to be doing that pose for very long. So we're going to go through in this training what are some qualities of the position of the body that helps us build greater stability. And I'll just really briefly touch on it. If you look at the skeleton here and you look at how the skeleton is set up, right? So we've got the alignment from shoulder to hip, to knee to feet, and the feet at hip width apart. So this is what's known as anatomical position, otherwise in yoga we call Tadasana. And there's a lot of inherent things in the shape that provide us with stability. And as we go through the training, I'm going to talk to you about what are the specific qualities about this position that we want to see in our students' postures so that they are safe and steady. One of the other things is when we understand more about anatomy as a teacher, we can inform our students about anatomy in such a way that they learn not only safe and healthy movement on the mat, but off the mat as well. So I'll give you a perfect example. When we ask people to interlace the hands behind the back and we ask them to squeeze the shoulder blades together, we're contracting the rhomboids. And these are the muscles that sit on the back and connect the medial aspect of the scapula to the spine. And when they adduct, they move in towards each other, they draw the shoulder blades closer together. And as a result of that action, they're stretching the muscles in the front of the body, most specifically, or kind of talking muscle names, pec minor and pec major, which live on the front line of the body. And this starts to get us into the relationship between muscles. So a muscle on the back contracts, and then as a result, a muscle on the front line of the body stretches. And so this relationship between these two muscles is something that we need to understand as teachers if we want to start to give our students, let's just take in this case, a way to stretch that part of the body which is so often contracted because we hunch all day. So this is a way that we can bring tips and cues into teaching, and then literally while we're teaching it, reference some lifestyle ways that they can bring this action into their day. So maybe as we're teaching, interlace fingers behind the back, we might just say something like, hey, this is a good thing to do when you're sitting at your desk for a couple hours working on a project. Take a break every hour and take this action and start to open the front line of the body. And as a result, you may see their poses kind of light up because you're talking about the benefit of the pose and the action they need to take to get that benefit. Another thing that can be helpful when you as a teacher understand anatomy more, and even when you as a student understand anatomy more, is it gives us information to help protect us if we go into a class, and here I'm talking more about as a student, and there's missing instruction. Let's say the teacher doesn't really get anatomy. Let's say he or she is asking you to do something that is a little bit risky for you. Let's say there's something specific about your body, like you have scoliosis or you're working with something in the hip, and the more you get it, the more you're going to be able to customize that practice to meet your needs. If you're unaware of how anatomy kind of works in the context of movement, then it's going to be really hard for you to do that. Now, many times people that have something happening in the body, whether it's an injury, maybe they're in treatment for something, maybe it's a condition they've lived with all their life, they probably have a good sense of it. But as teachers, the less we understand, the less we're able to do things like customize practices for private students, suggest modifications in group classes, answer questions that students have after class about specific things that are happening in the body. I'm going to go over one more here. There are more, but I'm just going to kind of keep it a little bit short. So the other thing, and this is a really, really big one, understanding anatomy, now let's take it from the teacher's point of view, allows us to build strength and flexibility with less risk of injury. So let's think about that for a second. What do you think is the primary reason why most people start yoga? I'm talking about the first-time student who's never done any and comes into the studio for the first time. Well, I would suggest that in almost every case, the main reason they're there is because they want to be more flexible. If you ask them, 9 times out of 10, I bet that's what they're going to say. And this is because kind of culturally, we have this thought that flexibility equals healthy. And I promise you that is not true, right? Healthy muscles aren't uber flexible. They have a good balance between contractibility and stretchability. And yoga is the perfect practice to build both strength and length because it gives us opportunities to move muscles in several different ways. So sometimes we're doing things where we're contracting muscles, so the fibers in the muscles are shortening. Sometimes we're doing things like a downward dog, or let's just kind of take a standing pose, like a warrior, where we're lengthening a muscle, in this case the psoas and the rectus femoris, part of the quadricep. And sometimes we're strengthening muscles by asking them to contract to hold the body in a particular position. So this is more of that isometric contraction. So in order for the body to kind of, let's just take that anatomical position I was talking about. In order for the body to hold itself in this position and fight the forces of gravity and other forces acting upon the body, it needs to have a good balance between strength and stretch. So this is why when people come to class and they're just kind of thinking about, I want to get stretchy, I want to get stretchy, you can literally see it in their postures and see how everything is overdone. Every pose is done to such a way that they're going super long. Every downward dog, they're pushing, 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 thinking, I've got to get my hamstrings longer. This is really something you see a lot in runners if you do runners workshops. And so as teachers, the less we understand the mechanics around stretching, what's happening in the body, where the muscles originate and attach, or the origins and insertions, when we don't really understand kind of the mechanics of stretching, what are receptors in the muscles and what happens when we're stretching a muscle too far. I mean, just think about it. The body in its infinite wisdom, why would it let us stretch and stretch and stretch a muscle, knowing that a muscle literally has a place it begins and a place that it ends? And if we just keep focusing on length, eventually that muscle is going to come detached from one end of the muscle itself. So this idea of understanding how muscles work, where muscles are, where's the origin, where's the insertion, what are key muscles, how do we teach in such a way so that we are encouraging balance and not asking people to do things that push them to their end range. This is what it means to teach in a way that we're using cues that support both strength and stretch, therefore overall health and long-term health, right? We don't want to be teaching in such a way that we're having people do all these funky things, and then after a couple of years their shoulders hurt and they're thinking, oh God, I did all those great postures or those cool postures, but now I feel like my shoulder's out of whack and my SI joint doesn't feel so great and my hip's bothering me. And you may be one of those students, and I certainly know from teachers I've known since 1999 and people I've been practicing with since the early 2000s, many of them do talk about aches and pains they have in their body. I can tell you myself, I was in physical therapy last year for 6 months for problems that I have in my neck that I absolutely know are from hyperextending my neck in a lot of poses, especially upward dog, and a lot of lifting the head as I teach. So all of this comes from kind of overuse, and even something like yoga, which we kind of think, oh, yoga's safe, yoga's great, yoga's healthy, but there's overuse patterns in something even as amazing as yoga, and if we don't understand anatomy, we could fall into those pitfalls as well. Okay. So this is a lot for video number 1. And I want to actually let you know, I do not script these at all. I'm literally standing here in my apartment in Boston, and I turned on the camera and I am talking. So this is all just coming forth from just my heart and my experience and just kind of working with teachers and doing workshops in person. So this is a completely spontaneous, no editing at all, cut of this video number 1, and all the videos will be like this as well. So let me just wrap up by just kind of giving you a little bit of focus again. So this is video number 1 of the Bare Bones Yoga Learn Anatomy Challenge, and in order for you to get the guide, the free PDF guide, all you've got to do is click the link, which I'm going to attach to this email or to this video, and that'll give you the guide to download. It'll walk you through an outline of what you can plan to gain by participating in each one of these videos and watching them and maybe doing some practice afterwards. I highly, highly recommend you go to my website, go to the online classes page, and download at least one. I'm talking $10. It's a breakfast at Starbucks, right? $10 for an online class, and that way you'll get to practice with me, get a sense of anatomically based cues. You can already take a look at the preview, the free preview for my online course, which goes into this in detail, and the link to that is on the guide as well. And you can also take a look at the anatomy manual. So if you're interested in, kind of right off the bat, since it's video number 1 that we're on, taking a look at the guide, purchasing the guide, just buy it right off the website. I actually just packaged one up a few minutes ago to mail out to somebody in West Virginia. And I've sent this as far away as Australia and the UK, and it's just been so cool to package these things up and send them literally all over the world to teachers. So guide in the link, manual, online course, any questions that you have at all, just feel free to email me, Karen@barebonesyoga.com. So we're done with video number 1 of the Bare Bones Yoga Learn Anatomy Challenge. I'm excited to continue this challenge with you, and if you have any questions, I really look forward to hearing from you. You can comment on this video here as well. So thanks for watching, and namaste.